She sat alone on her birthday, a candlelit cake in front of her, and no one to blow the flames out with. Paralyzed not just in body, but in life. She didn't expect company. She certainly didn't expect a little girl with messy braids and a plastic fox backpack to march up to her table and ask, "Can we join you?" That one question, asked without fear or pity, would unravel a year of grief, betrayal, and silence, and begin the quiet rebuilding of a woman who thought her story had ended. Vivian Hale hated celebrating her birthday. She hadn't always, but lately birthdays felt more like reminders than milestones. Reminders of what she'd lost, of who hadn't stayed. Still, tonight she made the effort. She was at Elysian, one of the city's sleek rooftop bistros. A place with string lights overhead, a modern jazz playlist humming low through invisible speakers, and a skyline view so sharp it could cut through grief. The host had offered her a table by the glass barrier, where the city lights looked like a sea of fireflies below. That was the only thing warm about the evening. Vivian sat alone at a table for 4. One place setting had been cleared. She told the staff not to worry about the other 3. "They'll be late," she had lied. The server with the sharp ponytail had smiled tightly and said, "Of course." Now it had been an hour. No one was coming. A petite cake sat untouched in the middle of the table. Soft white frosting, minimalistic design, with 5 slender candles poking through the top. A tiny gold plaque said "Happy Birthday," Vivian in delicate cursive. She hadn't ordered the cake. Her assistant must have arranged it before disappearing on medical leave 2 weeks ago. Vivian hadn't even told anyone else today was her birthday. She wore a black silk blouse, wide-legged cream trousers, and minimal makeup, enough to look put together. Not enough to look like she cared. Her long, dark curls were tucked behind one ear, revealing a small diamond stud. Her wheelchair, matte black with brushed metal accents, blended seamlessly into her aesthetic. Not that anyone was really looking. Except for the pity glances. She caught those. She always did. Vivian shifted her gaze to her phone. No notifications. No missed calls. Just a few dry "happy birthday party popper" messages from acquaintances and LinkedIn followers she barely remembered accepting. She tapped the screen off. Let the silence stay. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers gently twining and untwining like a nervous habit. A chilly breeze drifted in from the open rooftop edge, brushing past her shoulders. She resisted the urge to shiver. Her reflection in the glass wall stared back at her, composed, elegant, untouchable. You'd never guess she'd been crying in the car an hour ago. She looked down at the cake. It felt stupid sitting there like that. It was something you share, not something you stare at alone, waiting for time to pass. Vivian picked up the lighter the restaurant had left with the candles. Slim, silver, cool to the touch. She lit them one by one. The flames flickered, casting a golden glow on her cheekbones. No singing. No clapping. Just 5 tiny fires marking another year in a life that had shifted entirely off script. She didn't blow them out. Just watched. Watched until her eyes watered slightly, though not from emotion. She'd learned how to suppress those long ago. But from the candle smoke rising faintly into the night air. Then came the voice. Soft, bright, and totally unexpected. "Excuse me?" Vivian blinked. Looked up. There was a little girl standing near her table, no older than 7. She wore light-up sneakers, a unicorn hoodie, and 2 braided pigtails that bounced slightly as she shifted from foot to foot. In her hand was a plastic action figure, some kind of superhero with one arm missing. Behind her stood a man, mid-30s, casual in a Henley and dark jeans, a leather backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at Vivian with that hesitant, half-apologetic smile of someone trying not to intrude. The girl pointed to the cake. "Are you having a birthday?" she asked, her voice half-whisper, half-wonder. Vivian blinked again, surprised. "Yes," she said softly. "Why are you sitting alone?" the girl continued, completely innocent. Her father stepped forward quickly. "Lily, sweetie." But Vivian smiled, not politely, not pitifully, but genuinely. The first real smile in weeks. "It's okay," she said, her voice quiet. She turned to the little girl. "I was just about to make a wish." The girl beamed. Can we join you? Just for a little. Vivian hesitated, and in that split second, the weight of the evening started to shift. Not completely lifted, but tilted, like the breeze had nudged the atmosphere into a new direction. She glanced at the father, who gave her a gentle nod, waiting for her to decide. And just like that, something in her said yes. Yeah, she said, her voice steadier now. I'd like that. Lily's eyes lit up, and she hopped excitedly into the chair beside Vivian, her superhero figure clunking onto the table like a makeshift party guest. Her father pulled out the chair across from them. Thanks, he said. Didn't want to interrupt. You're not, Vivian said. She looked down at the cake. You're just on time. And for the first time that evening, she wasn't invisible anymore. Lily didn't wait for instructions. She hopped onto the cushioned chair beside Vivian, the back of her unicorn hoodie bunching up behind her as she plopped down and pulled her action figure into her lap like it was part of the dinner party. She swung her legs beneath the table, feet nowhere near touching the floor, while her eyes zeroed in on the cake like it was the most magical object in the world. Vivian blinked, still not entirely believing this was happening. Her thumb hovered over her phone's screen, her fingers twitching slightly with hesitation. But she didn't reach for it. For once, she let the moment breathe. The little girl looked up at her. You didn't blow out the candles yet. No, Vivian said. I didn't. Why not? Vivian paused, searching for the right answer. Maybe I didn't want the wish to end. Lily seemed to consider that deeply, then nodded. That makes sense. She reached out, hesitated, then pulled her hand back. Can I help? Vivian's mouth curved up slightly. You want to blow them out with me? Yeah, but only if it's okay. Vivian nodded. It's okay. They leaned in together, the flickering lights casting gold across both of their faces. One woman hardened by the world, one girl untouched by it. On the count of 3, they blew. The flames danced, fought, and then disappeared in a small curl of smoke. Lily clapped. Nice lungs, Vivian said with a quiet chuckle. I practice, Lily replied, completely serious. I yell a lot at home. Vivian looked across the table at the father, the man who had hovered politely just outside her orbit. Now, with the ice broken, he took a seat opposite them, resting his backpack on the ground next to his foot. He extended a hand. Jake. Vivian. Their hands met briefly, firm, warm, respectful. A flicker of something passed between them. Not romantic. Not yet. Just understanding. One adult to another. Two people who had clearly seen some things. I hope it's not too weird we came over, Jake said. She's bold. Gets it from her mom. Vivian tilted her head. Your wife. He looked down for a second. She passed away. 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Jake nodded once. Me too. Vivian said nothing else. No awkward apology. No generic comforting line. Just a small silence that honored the space between them. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, reached forward with both hands and plucked a piece of fondant flour from the cake. Wait, is this real? Can I eat it? Vivian grinned. Go for it. She looked at Jake. You two here for dinner? Trying to, Jake said, chuckling softly. We were on our way home from the movies, and someone claimed she was starving to death. Because I am, Lily mumbled, mouth full of sugar paste. Vivian laughed, and it surprised her how natural it felt. How not forced. A server approached their table, a little confused but professionally composed. She glanced at Vivian for approval. Vivian gave a small nod. Could we get another menu? Jake asked. Maybe a kid's one, if you've got it? The server returned moments later, and Lily immediately began flipping through the kids' menu like it was a sacred scroll. I want the cheeseburger, she announced, with the smiley face fries. And Sprite. Jake raised an eyebrow. You sure? Last time the Sprite made you hyper. Too late, Lily said. Vivian leaned her elbow on the table, chin resting on her hand, quietly observing them. She felt like she was watching a short film, something soft and real in a world that usually felt polished and cold. They were messy, honest, normal. Jake looked up at her. Can I ask you something? Vivian raised an eyebrow, curious. Sure. What made you come here tonight? Alone. She wasn't sure how to answer. Not really. She could have said, because I didn't want to be alone at home. Or because it was tradition before everything changed. Or because I was hoping someone might remember. But instead, she just said, I guess I didn't want to let the day pass like it didn't matter. Jake nodded slowly. Well, I'm glad you didn't. There was again, that quiet honesty. No drama. No pity. Just something true. Lily leaned across the table again, eyeing the cake like a predator. Can I have a piece? Vivian laughed. You didn't even wait for dinner. I'm a rebel. Jake reached out and gently nudged the plate toward her. We can split a slice after dinner, rebel. Lily folded her arms but didn't protest. Vivian glanced down at the melted candles. One had fallen sideways, and a little trail of wax bled into the frosting. She didn't care. For once, the cake had served its purpose. The silence that followed was easy, not tense. For the first time in what felt like forever, Vivian wasn't performing. She wasn't the CEO. She wasn't the woman people whispered about in hospital corridors or the one reporters speculated about post-accident. She was just a person, a woman, sitting at a table, with people. A gust of wind blew through the rooftop, tugging at her hair. Lily giggled. Your hair does the swoosh. Vivian smiled and leaned back in her chair. She looked up at the sky, dark, starless, but open. Something was shifting. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. She wasn't alone anymore. The food arrived all at once, like a tiny parade of warmth breaking into the chilled rooftop air. A kid-sized cheeseburger with perfectly round smiley face fries was set in front of Lily, followed by a wood-fired flatbread for Jake and a small arugula salad that Vivian hadn't touched since ordering it. The server refilled drinks and cleared away the melted candles without saying a word about the new guests at the table. Vivian sat back, watching the way Lily arranged her fries in a circle, one by one, like she was laying out soldiers before a battle. They taste better when they're looking at you, Lily said matter-of-factly. Jake cut his flatbread in half, pushed one side toward Vivian. Want a bite? It's chicken pesto. No judgment if salad's not cutting it. Vivian raised an eyebrow. You trying to feed me on my birthday? I'm trying to make sure you don't starve while the kid dominates the table, he said with a smirk. She accepted the plate without argument. Fair enough. It was a small thing, a half slice of flatbread passed from one stranger to another. But something about it felt grounding, like the act itself broke down one more invisible wall. Lily took a big bite of her burger and talked through it. Are you going to open presents? Vivian chuckled. I didn't bring any. Jake looked up. No one gave you any? Vivian hesitated. She pushed a piece of arugula around with her fork. I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday. Lily tilted her head. Why? Vivian considered lying. Or deflecting. But then she looked at Lily, all open-hearted curiosity, unfiltered honesty, and something in her softened. Sometimes, she said, you don't want people to pretend they care, so you give them the space not to. Lily didn't understand. That was clear. But she nodded anyway, the way kids do when they know something is sad, even if they don't know why. Jake looked at Vivian with a new stillness in his eyes, like he saw something he hadn't before. Vivian took a bite of the flatbread. It was warm, cheesy, just salty enough. It tasted like comfort. A few minutes passed like that, food, small talk, the sound of plates clinking. Lily told them about the movie they'd seen. Something about a robot dog that saves a city. She acted out the final scene, complete with explosion sounds and heroic barking. Vivian laughed, actual laughter, not the empty kind she used in meetings or interviews. The table felt alive. Jake leaned back in his chair. So what kind of work do you do, Vivian? Her posture stiffened for a second, but only slightly. I run a tech company, she said casually. Jake raised an eyebrow. That sounds important. Vivian smirked. It is. To some people. Lily interrupted with a mouthful of fries. Do you make robot dogs? Not yet, Vivian said. But clearly I should. They all laughed. The server walked by and smiled at the scene. A woman who had come in alone now laughing with a little girl and her father like they were old friends. It was the kind of thing that caught people's attention, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that made strangers feel better about the world. Eventually, the plates emptied. Vivian picked up the cake knife and looked at Jake. "We're really doing this?" Jake shrugged. "Only if you want." Vivian sliced into the cake, carefully placing a piece on each of their bread plates. She paused with the knife over the third piece, hesitated. "Who's that one for?" Lily asked. Vivian smiled faintly. "I guess someone who didn't show up." She put the knife down, pushed the third slice aside. Lily didn't ask again. They ate cake in comfortable silence. It was moist, buttery, a little too sweet. The kind of bakery cake that tried too hard to be elegant. Lily licked the frosting from her fork and declared it a solid 9 out of 10. When the server returned with the check, Vivian quietly covered it without letting Jake see. He noticed anyway. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Vivian said. "You guys made my night." Jake looked like he wanted to argue, but then saw the look in her eyes and just nodded. "Well, happy birthday, Vivian." Lily reached across the table and gave Vivian a sudden hug, not asking for permission, just doing it with the instinct of someone who understood when a person needed warmth. Vivian's body tensed slightly, then relaxed. Her arms slowly circled Lily, holding her gently. Her eyes closed, just for a second. It had been a long time since someone hugged her without needing something. Jake stood and helped Lily into her coat. The night had cooled, the sky turning deep indigo. The rooftop emptied out little by little, but their table held a stillness, like no one wanted to leave too quickly. "Come on, Rebel," Jake said softly to Lily. "Let's head out." Vivian watched them gather their things, that small ache rising in her chest again, the one she thought had left earlier. But this time it wasn't emptiness. It was gratitude, mixed with the sharp edge of longing. As they turned to go, Lily looked back. "You can come to our birthdays too, if you want." Vivian smiled. "I'd like that." Jake met her gaze once more. "Take care, Vivian." She nodded. "You too, Jake." They left. Just like that. No dramatic ending. No grand promises. Just real people walking back into the world. Vivian sat back in her chair, staring at the third slice of cake on the table. She reached for her phone, not to scroll, not to check work, but to open her notes app. She typed one thing. Still worth showing up. It had been 3 days since the dinner on the rooftop. 3 days since the impromptu birthday party with the little girl and her observant, soft-spoken father. Vivian hadn't stopped thinking about it. Not obsessively. Not in the way she used to replay meetings or interviews or investor calls in her mind, measuring what she could have done better. This was different. She just remembered. The laughter. The little arms wrapped suddenly around her shoulders. The way her name sounded when someone said it with warmth instead of obligation. She hadn't expected them to call. They didn't even have her number. But on the afternoon of the third day, as she was reviewing quarterly reports from her tablet on the sunroom patio of her townhouse, her doorbell rang. Her driver, Robert, tall, efficient, ex-military calm, answered it. Seconds later, he reappeared beside her. "There's a man and a young girl at the door asking for you. They said you met them at dinner." Vivian blinked once, slowly. Her heart, unexpectedly, kicked into motion. "Send them through." Jake looked the same as he had that night. Jeans, casual t-shirt under a denim jacket, worn sneakers. Lily was wearing overalls with rainbow patches and one of those child-sized backpacks shaped like a fox. Vivian was seated in her wheelchair, tablet balanced on her lap, a cup of tea cooling beside her on the glass table. She looked surprised, but not displeased. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon," she said. Jake gave a sheepish smile. "We were nearby." Lily insisted. Lily stepped forward, gripping the straps of her fox backpack. "We brought something." Jake held up a rectangular object, a slim, brightly colored envelope, obviously handmade. Lily handed it to Vivian with both hands like it was a sacred offering. Vivian opened it carefully. Inside was a folded piece of cardstock paper, covered in marker drawings. Crude but full of effort. Stick figures, one in a wheelchair, two others with big smiles and speech bubbles that said, "Happy late birthday again," and "Let's hang out more." There were also stickers. Lots of them. Glitter unicorns. Pizza slices. One that just said, "Go girl." Vivian stared at the card for a moment, her chest tightening. "I love it," she said softly. "Thank you, Lily." "You should put it on your fridge," Lily said seriously. "Like a reminder, of fun things." Jake scratched the back of his neck. "I promise we didn't mean to ambush you. Just figured we'd check in. Say hi." "I'm glad you did," Vivian replied. "Want some tea?" 10 minutes later, they were on the patio, tea poured, juice for Lily, the city humming gently in the background. Vivian's backyard overlooked a series of modern apartment buildings and community green space, all pristine and quiet. Her patio furniture was high-end minimalist, black steel frames, ash-gray cushions. Everything around her was curated, intentional, expensive. Jake looked like he wasn't sure whether to sit with both feet on the ground or keep one ready to stand. Vivian noticed. "You can relax," she said, half smiling. "It's not a job interview." Jake let out a chuckle and sat back fully. "Old habits." "From what?" "Construction, mostly. I run a small contracting business now. Nothing glamorous." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Glamour's overrated." Lily sipped her juice through a twisted straw, then asked, "Are you really a boss?" Vivian glanced at Jake, who looked both amused and mildly horrified. "Yeah," Vivian said. "I guess I am. Like a real boss with meetings and people who have to listen to you." Vivian smiled. "Sometimes they listen. Most of the time they just pretend." Jake laughed. "Sounds familiar." The mood shifted again, gentle, unforced. Vivian found herself wanting to fill the silence, but not with small talk. "Do you want to know what happened?" she asked suddenly. Jake looked at her. "You don't have to tell us anything." "I know," she said. "But I want to." Lily was coloring now. Vivian had handed her an old sketch pad and a box of colored pencils, which gave the adults a small island of privacy. Still, Vivian spoke softly. "A year ago," she began, "I was supposed to be married." Jake's face didn't change, but his eyes did. They quieted. "I was working too much. I always do. But we had plans, the wedding, the honeymoon, all of it. I'd finally made time for something other than work." She paused. "We were driving to a friend's lake house. I'd convinced him to take a weekend off. There was ice on the road. Just a patch." Her voice remained steady, but she took a breath before continuing. "I broke my back. I was conscious the whole time. Couldn't feel anything below the waist. Still can't." Jake didn't look away. No pity. Just listening. Vivian went on. "I was in recovery for 6 months. He came twice. Then stopped. Called once to tell me he couldn't do it. Said he loved me, but it was too hard. I haven't heard from him since." Silence settled like dust. Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees, but still didn't speak. He didn't offer the usual, "What a jerk," or "You deserve better." He just let her own it. Let it hang. Vivian nodded to herself. "I don't tell people that story. Not really. It's always too much. Or it becomes the only thing they see." Jake tilted his head. "It's not the only thing I see." Vivian blinked once, slow. Her throat tightened just a little. "I see someone who's still showing up," Jake said. "Even if it sucks. Even if no one shows up with you." Vivian couldn't speak for a second. The air felt heavier and lighter all at once. Then Lily looked up from her drawing. "Can we come again next week?" Vivian exhaled softly, a smile ghosting across her lips. "You can come whenever you like." It was a Saturday morning. Late spring. The kind of day where the sunlight looks intentional, not harsh or loud, but soft and clean, the way it looks in high-end skincare ads. Vivian was at the coffee shop she used to avoid after the accident. It was one of those hip places with exposed brick, eucalyptus bundles hanging from the ceiling, and menus written in looping chalk script. The kind of spot where everyone looked like they had a curated wardrobe and a perfect morning routine. But today she didn't care. She'd ordered her usual, a matcha latte with oat milk, no sugar, and wheeled herself to a corner table by the window. She had her phone, a book she wasn't actually reading, and the half-hope that maybe she'd see them again. The little girl and her father who'd come into her life like a gust of warm air in a locked room. 15 minutes in, the bell over the door jingled. Lily burst in first, a blur of bright colors and loud excitement. "I told you. I saw her. She's here." Jake followed behind, slightly out of breath, holding their drink tray like he'd just run a marathon. He spotted Vivian and smiled. "You're not stalking us, are you?" he asked playfully. Vivian smirked. "If I were, this would be a terrible cover." They joined her without hesitation. Lily climbed onto the chair beside Vivian's and announced, "I got a cake pop. It's pink. Want a bite?" Vivian shook her head. "I think you earned the whole thing." Jake set his cold brew down and leaned back in the chair opposite hers. "I didn't know you came here." "I didn't," she said. "Not for a long time." Jake studied her for a moment, like he knew there was more behind the answer, but respected the choice to leave it alone. Lily was humming quietly, swinging her feet. At some point, she pulled a crumpled brochure from her backpack. It looked like a museum handout with cartoon dinosaurs on the cover. "I want to go to this," she declared. "Can we all go?" Vivian raised an eyebrow at Jake. "All of us?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "You're part of the team now." Jake laughed. "That's what you get for letting her steal your fries." "I'd do it again," Vivian replied. They talked for a while. About nothing urgent. Books. Movies. The way Lily refused to eat crusts. Vivian told a story about firing a marketing executive for creating a campaign with a unicorn mascot. I'm not kidding. He thought it was edgy. Jake told a story about accidentally cutting power to an entire building during a renovation job. 200 angry tenants and one very loud chihuahua. The ease between them was almost suspicious. Vivian wasn't used to it. She kept waiting for the conversation to fall into awkward silence, or for Jake to ask her a question that would turn everything sterile and performative. But he didn't. Then he did ask something, not invasive but loaded. "So, hail dynamics," he said, tracing the lip of his cup. "That's you, right?" Vivian paused. She looked at him. "You knew?" Jake gave a small shrug. "Kind of figured it out after the third news article my phone showed me last night." Vivian didn't speak right away. This was the moment where things usually shifted, where eyes widened and voices changed and people suddenly turned formal, guarded, performatively impressed. But Jake didn't change. He didn't lean back. He didn't pull out a checklist of company names or ask how much she made. He just sat there, looking at her like she was the same woman who ate flatbread with him on a rooftop. Vivian tilted her head. "And," Jake smiled softly, "and I still think you let Lily eat way too much cake." She exhaled, half relief, half disbelief. He wasn't impressed because he didn't need to be. He saw her already. The rest was just detail. Vivian nodded slowly. "My ex didn't handle the whole CEO in a wheelchair thing very well." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Your ex was a moron." Vivian laughed. "You're not wrong." A short pause settled over the table, not awkward, just full. Lily was now drawing a velociraptor with long eyelashes and holding it up proudly for passing strangers. Jake looked back at Vivian. "For what it's worth, I didn't Google you to be nosy. Just curiosity." "I get it," she said. "I would have too." He hesitated, then said, "The accident. That had to be." "It was hell," she said, cutting him off gently. "Not to be rude, just to be honest." Jake nodded once, like that was all he needed to hear. No prodding. No soft questions in the name of empathy. Vivian looked out the window. "There was a long time where I didn't think I'd ever leave the house again. I didn't want people to see me like this. I hated the pity, the careful stares. Even the people who meant well, it always felt like I was a shadow of who I used to be." Jake didn't interrupt. She turned back to him. "And then I met your daughter, who walked up to me with her fox backpack and cake pop opinions and didn't see anything broken. She just saw a woman with a cake and decided we should be friends." Jake smiled, his eyes warm. "Yeah, She does that. Vivian looked at Lily, who was now using napkins to build a dinosaur hotel across the table. She gave me something I didn't realize I needed, she said. And I guess so did you. Jake didn't respond right away. Then he said very quietly, same here. The noise of the cafe carried on around them. Espresso machines, laughter, indie music playing through tinny ceiling speakers. But at their little table, it felt like the volume dropped. Vivian tapped her fingers lightly on her cup, then looked at Jake. So, dinosaurs? Jake nodded. Dinosaurs. Lily threw her hands in the air. Yes. Vivian's life used to run like a polished machine. 6 a.m. wake-ups. 30-minute workouts with her trainer. Smoothie news briefings, then a wall of back-to-back meetings. Everything in her calendar was color-coded, calculated, down to the 15-minute buffer between leaving the office and stepping into the car that would carry her back to her solitude. She hadn't needed anyone. That's what she used to say, over and over. But now, her calendar had new entries. Thursday, 4:30 p.m., Lily's art show, Bring Flowers. Saturday, 10 a.m., brunch with Jake and Lily at Courtyard Cafe. Tuesday, 8 p.m., movie night, Jake picks. At first, she wrote them in her planner almost hesitantly, like penciling in a fragile hope. But they kept happening. 1 week became 2, and 2 became a month, and soon, she stopped seeing these moments as interruptions. They became the framework, the structure around which her more polished life quietly reassembled itself, not the corporate version, but the personal one, the one she'd nearly forgotten how to build. On one of those Tuesday nights, Vivian sat on her couch with a soft blanket across her legs and a bowl of popcorn on her lap while Lily explained, with absolute conviction, why the movie Zootopia was actually a political thriller in disguise. I mean, think about it, Lily said, pacing the living room like a tiny professor. It's about prejudice and justice, and believing in people even when they're different. Vivian, thoroughly charmed, smiled. Should I be taking notes? Jake sat cross-legged on the rug, sipping a ginger beer. You should. She's been preparing this monologue for days. I have, Lily said proudly, flopping down next to Jake and grabbing another handful of popcorn. And now I rest. Vivian watched them. The way Lily curled comfortably against her father. The way Jake gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear without even realizing he was doing it. They were easy with each other. Real. Untouched by any of the brittle, transactional closeness Vivian had come to associate with adult relationships. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with her arms wrapped around one of Vivian's throw pillows, Jake helped carry her to the guest bedroom Vivian had started keeping just for her. He was careful, not like she was fragile, but like she was treasured. Vivian waited in the hallway, her wheelchair quiet on the hardwood floor. Jake closed the door gently behind him. Out cold, he whispered. Vivian smiled. Movie analysis really takes it out of a person. They stood there for a moment, the hallway dim, shadows stretching toward the kitchen. Jake leaned against the wall. She asked me the other day if you were like ours. Vivian blinked. What did you say? I told her I didn't know yet, Jake said, not looking away. But I said I hoped so. Vivian felt something shift behind her ribs. Not a snap. Not a jolt. Just a subtle, undeniable click. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, I've never belonged to anyone before. Not like that. Jake stepped forward closer. You've always belonged to yourself. Maybe now you just belong with us too. That night, after Jake left, Vivian didn't go back to emails or reports. She didn't scroll or numb or distract. She simply sat in the living room and looked around. There were signs of them everywhere. A pair of Lily's socks on the floor. An empty juice box on the side table. A drawing of a smiling sun and 3 stick figures. One with wheels drawn in blue crayon, taped to the fridge with a glitter magnet. It didn't look like a perfect home, but it looked like hers. Finally, the following weekend, they took a day trip. The museum Lily had begged for, the one with the animatronic dinosaurs and interactive exhibits and overpriced gift shop keychains. Vivian had worried she'd be in the way, the crowd, the chaos, the noise. but Jake moved beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world. No overcorrection. No patronizing. Just presence. And Lily? Lily made it a mission. She pulled Vivian through the exhibits, read every plaque out loud, and insisted they take a picture next to the life-size T-Rex. Jake took it, Vivian in the wheelchair, Lily on her lap, both of them making silly faces while the dinosaur roared above. Later that evening, Jake texted her the photo with a caption that read, "Family portrait?" Vivian stared at it for a long time. Then she saved the photo, set it as her phone's lock screen. Didn't tell anyone, but she smiled every time she looked at it. The next week, during a board meeting, one of her VPs asked about an unexpected change to her travel schedule. "Just shifting priorities," Vivian said coolly. No one questioned it. No one dared. She left the office at 5 o'clock sharp, no apology. By 5:30, she was seated on a bench by the park near Jake's apartment, watching Lily ride her scooter in circles, hair flying behind her like a flag. Jake sat beside her, sipping a thermos of coffee. "You left work early," he said, without judgment. "I was done," she replied simply. He turned to her. "Good." And that was it. No need to prove herself. No need to shrink or perform. Just a quiet moment. A new routine. Vivian had never been a fan of spring. It was too sentimental. Too soft around the edges. A season for pastel weddings and rooftop brunches and endless photos of blooming trees. All reminders of what she used to dream of before everything changed. But now spring had a different sound. It was Lily yelling, "Watch this," from the far end of the backyard before launching herself off a plastic slide. It was Jake's deep laugh, carried in the wind as he stood by the grill, flipping burgers and looking entirely content in a faded baseball cap. It was music, actual music, playing from her living room speakers, not just low background noise or ambient jazz. A playlist they'd all made together. One song from each of them on rotation. Vivian sat in her wheelchair near the patio table, sunlight caught in her curls, sunglasses on, drink in hand. Her backyard, once a sleek, minimal space with glass lanterns and expensive landscaping, now looked slightly chaotic. There were chalk drawings on the pavement. A purple inflatable ball rolling in the breeze. A folding table covered with mismatched paper plates, bubbles, and a vase of wildflowers Lily had picked on a walk that morning. It wasn't curated. It was alive. Guests milled about. Not a lot, just a few people Vivian trusted. A couple colleagues from her leadership team, Jake's sister and her wife, the neighbor with the corgi who always barked at pigeons. It wasn't a party so much as a gathering, a celebration of nothing and everything. There was no occasion, no announcement, just being. Still, as Vivian looked around, she felt something like an anniversary blooming beneath her ribs. A quiet marking of time. It had been almost a year since the accident. 11 months since her fiancé left. 6 weeks since Lily first hugged her. 3 days since Jake kissed her for the first time. That had been quiet too. After dinner. In her kitchen. No music. No lead up. Just a moment when their eyes met, and they both knew. Now he was walking toward her with a plate in one hand and a glass of lemonade in the other. "For the birthday girl," Jake teased. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "It's not my birthday." Jake grinned. "Doesn't matter. You're still the girl." He handed her the plate, one of Lily's smiley face fries placed deliberately next to the burger. She laughed. "She did this, didn't she?" Jake nodded proudly. "She said you'd appreciate the presentation." "I do." He sat beside her, their chairs almost touching. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They just watched Lily chase bubbles across the yard, screaming and laughing like the sky was listening. Jake looked over at Vivian. "She talks about you constantly, you know." Vivian smiled. "Yeah. She calls you her best friend. Said you're her favorite grown-up. Said you make her feel like a big person who still gets to be small." He paused. That last part hit me. Vivian swallowed the sudden lump in her throat. Jake turned fully to her. "I know this all happened fast. I know you've got a whole world that existed before we ever showed up. And I'm not trying to invade that. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to build something here. Something real. Vivian looked at him. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't falling over himself to declare love. He was just there. Solid. Grounded. True. She reached for his hand, weaving her fingers with his. You already did, she said. Jake's jaw tightened slightly, the way it did when emotion crept up uninvited. Across the yard, Lily tripped over a garden hose and popped back up like a spring. I'm okay, she yelled to no one in particular. Vivian and Jake both laughed. That night, after the guests left and the plates were stacked in the sink and Lily had fallen asleep in Vivian's bed, curled into the comforter like a burrito, Jake and Vivian sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room. She rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever think about the life you almost had? She asked quietly. Jake tilted his head. Sometimes. I used to think I lost everything, she said. That the accident was the end of my story. Jake turned toward her slightly, brushing a thumb across her knuckles. It wasn't the end, he said. It was the page before the best part. Vivian looked at him, eyes steady. And what's that? He didn't answer. Instead, he kissed her, slow, sure, and full of all the things he didn't have words for. When she pulled back, her eyes were glassy. But not from sadness. From knowing. From having. She looked around her living room, the soft chaos of family settling into her once perfect world, and said, I used to think love had to look a certain way. Polished. Neat. Impressive. Jake smiled. We are not neat. She laughed, nodded. No. But we're real. He kissed her forehead. And we're just getting started. Outside, the spring wind shifted. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to remind her. Things grow again. Even the broken things. Especially them. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.